Coast to coast and around the globe, you're listening to Tarot Today Radio. We are the show that brings you the world of tarot, interviews with your favorite tarot authors, teachers, and deck creators, as well as news from the guild, interesting topics, fun, and readings. I am your host, Dax Carlisle. I'm the founder and president of the Tarot Guild, the international organization for tarot lovers, students, and professionals. Since 2004, I'm a professional tarot advisor, numerologist, hypnotherapist, and life coach coming to you live from Tucson, Arizona. And let me introduce the other host of Tarot Today Radio. She's also a tarot advisor, a certified tarot master and crystal Reiki master, and vice president and director of communications for the Tarot Guild. And here she is live from Amarillo, Texas, the fabulous Mary Brown. Happy Psychic Saturday, Mary.
Hey, Dax. Hey, everybody. Happy Psychic Saturday.
Here we are. We got a great show for you today, a fabulous interview with none other than Ciro Marchetti. This is going to be a lot of fun. It's a listener party in the chat room, folks. Come join us in the chat room. You could talk to Mary and I live as we all listen in to Mary's interview. Go over to chat.psychictalk.net. That's chat.psychictalk.net. And you'll find the chat room right below the player. You can listen to the show there, and the chat room will materialize below the player there. You can jump in and comment and everything like that. You know, Mary, last week we had on Sharona talking about the Boho Pixie Tarot.
Yes, that was a blast. And what you guys have to listen in archive if you haven't already. It was so wild. It was almost like Pixie was having fun with us on the air.
Yeah, Sharon and I kept getting knocked off, and we had to call back into the show. We're like, okay, there's some energy going on here. Plus, we were still in Mercury retrograde, I think. But I brought that up because, you know, we got to find out all these things that we didn't know about Sharona. And I was thinking the same thing about you today. A lot of people don't realize that you were a Hollywood reporter and interviewer.
Yeah, you know, I don't always lead with that. You know what's funny is, and I think this is true for anybody, when you go from one industry to another, and I think even Ciro could talk about this too. Maybe we did. I can't remember. It's such a great interview. I feel like, wow, I'm like, this is exciting. But when you go from one industry to another, you find that just like in tarot, how it's a collection of archetypes, a lot of times the things that we're familiar with in that industry that we worked with and stuff become our collection of archetypes that we take to the next one. So maybe I don't talk about it a lot, but I feel like I'm always referencing things in Hollywood because it's my comparison, you know. So is it, yeah.
Right.
You know, if people ask me, I'll talk about it forever.
I know. I love that, you know, you've done all the big interviews with the big stars, and now you're interviewing the stars of tarot, and that's why I bring this up, because that's why Mary's doing the interview, folks, because, yeah, she did this in a previous life, you know.
Yeah, well, don't oversell my interview skills. Let's keep our expectations reasonable. You know, even the pros get nervous around you know, big talent. You know, and Ciro Marchetti, he's an A-lister to me. I'm like, this is amazing.
Yeah,
it's not. He was the number one person I wanted to interview because I was so fascinated by his work. And you have some of his decks. I have some of everybody, right? How can you resist? Most of us can't resist.
One of the decks you talk about in the interview I just got from the U.S. Games, Tarot Decoratif. I can't say it the way he says it, you know. But you guys also talk about Mystic Palette Tarot. Oh, God, there's so many good things. So we're going to find out right now. We're going to listen to the interview. We're going to Mary and I are going to pop into the chat room and join all of you, and we're just going to all chat and listen in live to the interview with Ciro Marchetti. We're also going to come back live after the interview, so stay tuned. You know, when you hear the interview wrapping up, stay on the line listening there, because we're going to come back live and we'll have some things for you at the end there. So here we go without any further ado, right, Mary?
Yes, away we go.
All righty.
Hello, Ciro. Welcome to the Tarot Today radio show. We are so happy you could join us today, and I have so many questions that our listeners who are, you know, fans. You have such a fan base at the Tarot Guild and on this radio show, and I'm one of them. We all have a lot of your decks, but you have a new deck coming out through US Games. I think it's now out and available now. Your Tarot Decoratif or Decorative. And it's so interesting. It combines elements of both the Rider-Waite-Smith and Tarot de Marseille traditions in the minor arcana. And it's in such a clever way that it makes me excited about working with it. So I have to wonder, did that idea to do the minors that way, was that like a sudden strike of inspiration, or was it something that, you know, was like a riddle for you? Like, how am I going to approach this?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on the show. I hope I can answer your various questions with some degree of convincibility. In reference to the Tarot Decoratif, yes, I pronounce it with a French title. I seem to have a penchant for French titles in my various decks. No, it wasn't an impulse. It was based on the fact that I was attending a tarot conference as a vendor, and so I was really just at the back of the audience, and from my booth, as it were, I could listen in on the various presentations. One of them was by a guy called Russell Sturgis, and I was rather impressed by his keynote presentation. It was a slick presentation, but in addition to that, he was making sense. He was providing a rationale for the Marseillaise, which as a genre I wasn't particularly interested in. I mean, I quite liked the cuter old woodcuts for sure, but it didn't do that much for me, and I really hadn't had that much interest in working with it or making adaptations of it. But as I say, this caught my attention because as a graphic designer, he was providing a kind of historical and symbolic rationale for a lot of the elements in the Marseillaise, which made sense to me as a graphic designer. He proposed a theory that the Cathars had used the imagery of the earlier tarot decks to really project meanings of their religious faith, but in a manner that would be acceptable and tolerable to the overbearing reach of the Vatican, and they try to avoid persecution as a result of that. So they disguise the imagery in a kind of playful way, if you will. Now, not everyone agrees with that theory, but nevertheless, it appealed to me, it made sense to me, and minor details that he emphasized made perfect sense. For example, the cross-legged pose of the emperor, which is physically or ergonomically rather uncomfortable, so why would anyone want to depict it in that manner? And the coincidence of that versus, or along with, say, the cross-legged pose of the upside-down hangman, he suggested that those physical characteristics were in fact symbols of a kind of graphic number 4 with a little embellishment, which was the watermarked brand logo that the Cathars used in their paper making process. You see, so there's all these little nuances.
Wow.
I thought, wow, that's pretty cool, you know? And so it intrigued me into taking a second look at the Marseillaise. And one has to be very careful when redesigning cherished older decks, because they come with a very eager and enthusiastic and faithful fan base or following. You know, people have grown up with it. It has historical precedence and authenticity, if you will. So play with it, adapt it at your peril, because a lot of people simply would not want or be interested in any tweaking of their beloved system. So in regards to majors, I try to be as respectful as possible. The charm of the woodcuts is all very well. It is charming, but at the risk of offending their followers even more, the technical ability of the woodcut, the standards of the woodcut, was not the best example of that art form or that medium, you know. That's because throughout tarot history, very often, the average tarot printer really couldn't justify paying the top artists of the day. You know, the church and wealthy patrons already hired them. So the printers were dealt with a sort of a lesser degree, and no offense meant. It is what it is. Furthermore, they were factories. You know, let's not kid ourselves. They were churning out these decks at quite a volume. So we're not talking about sort of faithful monks sitting there for years sweating over these works of art. They were produced in bulk relative to the production capacities of the day. And so very often I, as a designer, as a graphic designer, I look at these images, and whilst they were cutely appealing, they lacked the detail that would justify many of the meanings that were given to them after the fact. You know, there is no evidence that I'm aware of in the voice of the people, the artists or the craftsmen who actually produce these decks. Everything we know or we are led to believe about the meanings have been written decades and centuries after the fact. And they become the fact by the retelling. And I question that.
My God.
I always did.
Wow. You know, yes. Thank you. Because nobody says that. Nobody, you know, it's so difficult. I think everyone has their mythology of it, you know. But I love that you were inspired by what that guy at the symposium, I forgot, it's just told me, Russell, somebody was saying about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, as I say, it made sense, and it gave me an opportunity. Well, it caused me to look at the deck in a new light, and and so my intention was not to improve on it, because that's awfully subjective and arrogant to even claim one can achieve that. But I did want to reach a balance, which was to clearly use the Marseillaise look and feel, its colouring, its composition, the poses, characters, etc., so that anybody familiar with the Marseillaise could relate to those images. They would recognise them. But I did them, again, my style, and in a way that I hoped might appeal to a different audience who, like myself, may not have been particularly enamoured with the older historical ones. You know, I felt there was an opportunity there to sell, and I don't mean that in a commercial way, but to project the charm of the Marseillaise in a more appealing style. But having said that, I did pay due respect to the tradition. I followed the color
it's recognizable.
And so that was the balance. I don't know how successful I've managed to be in that, but that was certainly the objective. But
I love that.
And I did a lot of research. I hope that people don't just casually dismiss this just based on the look of the deck. They may like it, they may not, but if they buy it or before they make any reviews on it, I would hope that they bother to read the book, the companion book, because as I say, that and just sort of like provided eye candy. I have given an explanation of why I did what I did, and they don't have to agree with it, but at least take that into consideration, because I think it's relevant. There's a lot of elements in the Marseille that I simply could not agree with. I mean, so much has been written that my opinion has sort of over-romantically exaggerated what is supposedly in those images. They suggest the most incredibly nuanced subtlety in the details. The expression of a face, or the exact angle of a pointing finger. That if you were to draw a line between that and the flower in the third card next to it, perfectly aligned. No, I just didn't get that. I didn't agree with it. A lot of rationale and justification for the colors that are used, that they have religious, mythological associations. Yes, and probably no. The real reason, if the use of color was as important in its significance as many books have suggested, then by default there would have been more attempts by the various printers in the region of Avignon, where all these were produced, to be consistent. If the use of red or green or blue, whatever, was that big a deal, they would have all been aware of that. Would have tried to be complicit in the use of that. But they're not. If you compare various decks, they vary. And so in my cynical commercial opinion, based on my knowledge of print and my tours of print factories in Germany when I visited, I concluded that they were as vulnerable or subject to commercial criteria as printers and designers are today. They used the colors that probably they had available. For example, the use of blue as a color was very limited. And why? Not because of its aesthetics or because of its mythological, spiritual potential meaning, but because it was expensive. The pigments to blue were disproportionately expensive. Therefore, blue was used limited and for special occasions, let's say, or special use, i.e. the Virgin Mary was often depicted in blue because, she was worth it, And so I am cynical, I'm sorry. I am. Yeah.
Oh, my. Well, there's a whole other, we could have a whole conversation about color, just because if you look at what people say about the significance and symbolism of colors, there's color therapy, people say all kinds of different things. Those theories we have today are not what those colors meant to people in the 1400s, in the 1500s, and that, they didn't have those same concepts that book writers have told us that we need to believe. But the other thing that I was thinking about too is, we're talking about the Decoratif, and that's, mass market, available through U.S. Games. It's accessible to, but you can't go online and not find the mass market things, right? They're being marketed to us. But I think what's interesting about your work is that you also have your own, and you make these self-published decks, and they're like the Cadillac of tarot card decks, I think, right? They're always so highly sought after. People gush over them. It's like, well, I got the self-published version, I'm like, oh, man. But, there's that kind of fun thing where people get really excited. And I took a look at your website, and for everybody listening, there's a link to Ciro's website on our show page here. You want to go over there and just explore, take a look around. But so many people think, they love your self-published decks. And what I saw of your latest, the Mystic Palette Tarot, it just looks gorgeous. And can you give us a sense of, well, one, when is it going to be available? And also, what's the concept for it? Like, what do we have to look forward to?
Well, I produce all of my decks initially as self-published. I sell, yes, they go for a higher price because they are produced in significantly lower quantities, and that's the most influential sort of factor that influences the price of a deck. And then, well, I produce them in relatively small numbers for two reasons. One, because I can never tell how well they may or may not do, and I want to avoid getting stuck with a whole unsold inventory in my garage. I'm being a little bit flippant because I've been fortunate enough that they do sell. And at that point, I have the option to print more, to let them go out of print, or to license them to the two major publishers that I work with, which is US Games and Llewellyn. When I do the latter, it's not for financial benefit per se, because the difference between mass-produced decks, or the sales of them, the royalties from them, and selling them direct is actually pretty close. But I do, get more satisfaction in a sense from the mass-produced ones, because if I were to sell 1,000 copies of a self-published edition, yeah, that's nice. Of course it's nice. But it's not as nice as knowing that, say, 50,000 people have bought the mass-produced edition, even if financially there's no difference, because it's just more satisfying, more people. It's good to feel that, there's more acceptance of one's work. Now, throughout my last 18 years, I have been sort of branded or pigeonholed as a digital artist. And that's not necessarily a good thing, because a lot of people kind of look down on that medium. And I've been very conscious of that. So over the last few projects, I have deliberately textured my work, as it were, so that it doesn't have that sort of recognizable slickness that one might associate with rendered art. I texture it, I make it less digital in a sense, even though it still is. And in each deck, I sort of like tweaked that somewhat, I've exaggerated that feel and style. Now, in the Mystic, once again, in an attempt to appease the varying tastes of the tarot community, customers and collectors alike, which is, of course, an impossibility. This Goldilocks deck is impossible. But I have attempted to at least minimize it, the choice, expand on the choice by producing the deck in two options, two principal objects. One is a full color, glossy, metallic edged all the bells and whistles. And the other one is a more sober, sort of sepia-tinted vintage look with a plainer matte finish. And so people can choose between those two. I also offered, and I kind of regret it now, but I offered a third option whereby people could order a variable of the back of the reverse design. The front will be generic. The back would have someone's name and their zodiac sign. So literally, it would be one deck produced just for them. And so that's the ultimate collector's sort of touch, And it was a real pain to do because the order, and I'm blessed to say, at far more numbers than I expected because they weren't cheap. I had to do each one.
Yeah.
You can imagine the printing costs involved in just doing one copy of a deck. It's absurd. But so I managed to do it. But by the time the orders came in and people would either use their real name, an abbreviation of that, or their professional reading name, like Moonlight Express or whatever. It was really an administrative hassle to keep all this organized. And, it's done. They're at the printers at speak. So fingers crossed, Always trying to up the ante here.
Boy, and, I can understand that, doing that, and I think it can happen a lot where we're like, okay, I'm really going to up the ante, but then that translates just put on my desk, doing that. Let's talk about art for a second. I guess I don't, what you described about people talking about reference, calling it digital art, I just think, okay, well, can they do it? Because digital art to me, that sounds like a lot of math, and I don't see a lot of math when I look at your art. But anyways, let's talk about this a bit. To me, great art evokes an emotion within us. And the thing that I think is kind of unique, though, about tarot artists is that people are holding their artwork in their hands. Some people are putting it on their third eye, or doing a chakra, it's very intimate contact. They're studying the cards. They're, looking at it up close, and in an effort to connect and to remember, what the cards mean, to learn too. But it's much more close contact with you. I think any artist working in other genres, people aren't, connecting so closely with it. And I just wonder, is it something that comes to mind when you create a deck, and just how do you feel about that? Because it's kind of weird. I don't think outside the tarot world people are doing that with artwork. I could be wrong, but I've never done that with a painting.
It's a very crucial element to be considered. First of all, in your initial reference to sort of digital art being mathematical, yes, it can be, but you have to better understand what's involved. It isn't just a case of sort of typing in numbers and producing Pixar, video game kind of things. No, in my case, it's far more natural in the sense I just have a digital pen in my hand. So the physical action involved in producing an image is quite similar. I have a pen in my hand, I press on a surface, that surface produces an image which I'm seeing on a screen as opposed to paper. In that sense, it's business. The advantages of it is that it's far easier for me to make adjustments. I can vary after the fact the color, the size, the position, et cetera, et cetera. And so ultimately it's like it's an eraser on steroids, if you will. Some people may interpret that as like an easy route, sort of a cheat sheet. That's absurd. I see it as a creative tool, the ability to look at one's own work and think, would it be better if I tweaked this or adjusted that? That isn't cheating. It's part of the creative process, for Christ's sake.
Absolutely.
So in regard to the reaction people will have to it, yes, as an art form, I've tried and I can't think of anything that comes close to the symbiotic relationship of the artwork, the imagery, and its users, the readers.
Yeah.
It's I think a unique experience because not only do readers like the imagery, if indeed they do, not only do they react to it visually as one would with other art forms, fine art forms, but they're part of the main ingredients, of course, is its use as a tool. It's the symbiotic relationship of how the reader not only responds to the imagery emotionally, but then applies that or has that emotional effect influence how they read and how it sort of triggers their intuition plus their sort of academic know-how. Now, so that's something I absolutely take into consideration. I am fully aware of how these images will be used, not just admired. They're not going to be just pinned to a wall and admired, They are going to be used.
Yeah.
And so I try to put myself in the position of a reader, and by default one can only do that in the most generic way, because every reader is distinct. But try to create an image that will elicit an emotional response, that will hopefully cause a more intimate and stronger reaction to the imagery than other decks. That's subjective, once again, but that is my goal. I want people to I produce images that are deliberately neutral. In many cases, they're very expressions are neutral. They're neither sad nor happy. They are somewhat ambiguous, once again, deliberately. I mean, what is that person in card XYZ thinking? I try to illustrate them in a way that they could be thinking anything. And it's up to the reader to put words in that character's mouth or mind, depending on what they're reading, who they're reading for, what the cards next to it are, etc., etc., etc.
Sure.
So, yeah.
All of that. That's amazing. And I think that's great because you're so right about that. We, do have to put, as readers, that's our job. It's like, what is the character trying to tell me? I think is sometimes the way that we look at it. But it is a unique kind of art that you're doing, and I think it's so cool that at least, one, we know you take this kind of stuff into consideration, and you have that awareness of it. So at least one artist out there is thinking about it in the tarot. That's how I think about it. But my goodness, you have such a wealth of experience, not just in tarot, but your graphic design work and businessman and all of these things. To me, it's like you're probably when somebody says, like, who makes tarot decks, you're the one person that you're like, sure, you say the first name and everybody knows. because they're like, that's the guy, the Brad Pitt of the tarot world, the celebrity. That's how I look at it. All my references are Hollywood. But that body of work, that wealth of knowledge that you've experiences, let's do a little time traveling, okay? If you could go back in time and talk to the young Ciro who's just starting out, what might be the one thing you'd want to tell him, the one piece of advice that you would give the young you?
Are you referring to this in a life approach or tarot approach?
Anything that comes to mind, just that thing that you wish somebody you would have told yourself, or that you wish somebody had told you, like, all right, you're coming out into the world, you're a young man about to hit your path, and look both ways before you try.
I've done quite a bit in my life. I have few regrets, far less than many people, I assume. I've worked. I grew up in the UK, worked in Europe, worked in South America, worked in the US. I've been out of work. I've employed over 30 people. I've loved and lost. So the full gamut, yeah? And they've all sort of chipped away and made me what I ended up being. Now, if anything, looking back, one common factor is I'm actually completely lacking in confidence. I'm always trying to defend my tarot deck. I'm defending so many things. And looking back, I would say to my younger self, like, chill out and have a little bit more confidence. It will work out, just plug away. Whereas at the beginning, I tended to just be panicked into some wrong decisions because I was worried that it just wouldn't work out, And so I took the safer road, and I think that I missed out on a lot of things because of that. I could have done a lot more adventurous things in my earlier days, and I kind of regret, like, why didn't I do that world tour to Tibet and back, on a bike? Or I'm being sarcastic. I was so to say that Mr. Average, Mr. Play by the rules kind of thing. Bit boring, probably.
Yeah. Well, that's great advice, though, because even when we're not young, a lot of people that call into our show, they have that kind of thing too, where they don't have the confidence that they need to actually have the experiences that they want to have too. Sometimes you've done a lot of your life, so many things in your life and traveled, and there's so many people that are just afraid to even do that. So that's terrific advice that, boy, I wish we had all heard, beginning stage, to know that just chill out. It's going to work out. I love that. But that idea of, touches on something else I wanted to ask you. I tend to, because I came into the tarot world from Hollywood, that's kind of my collection of archetypes. And in a way, I see tarot deck artists as being a bit similar to comic book movie makers. Because they're, like you said, taking these beloved characters and putting their own spin on them, and those characters have a very opinionated, if not rabid, fan base. I would say, if you've ever been to Comic-Con. But I think it takes a lot of guts to do it, and a strong spine, kind of. Where do you think yours came from? What made you able to to say, like, no, I want to do this. I'm going to see what happens, like you were talking about with taking on the Marseille.
Well, Initially, I didn't have that courage. My first deck was very much sticking to the rules and keeping relatively faithful to the original characters, so to speak, as they had been depicted previously. It was only later that I sort of like gambled a little more, said, no, I'm going to do it my way. But to use your analogy of the comic book, I get that. I mean, you know, whether it's sort of the quintessential Superman, Batman, superhero scenario, and people grew up with that, you know, with the, not just how they were depicted, you know, the costumes they wore, or what they said, or how, or the personalities that they were given. If the movies, you know, several decades later, modified those preconceptions too much, yeah, it's not surprising that there was some sort of kickback to that, you know. Now, having said that, they obviously have to keep up with the times, as it were. So one thing is for Hollywood to redesign the costumes and make them more muscly or sexy or whatever it happens to be. But if they started to play around a little bit too much, you know, and make the character have different characteristics of humor or attitude or whatever, then yeah, I could imagine that would rub some people the wrong way. Now, in the case of Taro, where once again there are predetermined characteristics for the various personalities in the card, that's less of an issue, because who's to say that those preconcepts were correct in the first place? Once again, I harp on the fact that what people think of and associate with older tarot cards is what they've written about them, not because that was determined by the people who created those images in the first place. So the truth, the accuracy, if you will, of those characters and how they are depicted by anyone, up for grabs in a sense, you know. So I didn't feel that I was obliged to depict the characters in any sort of faithful way to what I had read in a book they were supposed to be. I had to depict them in such a way that there was some degree of recognition, so readers could, you know, yeah, okay, they get it, and bingo, off they go and they read with it. But I didn't feel that I should have to be that restricted and faithful to the past. I think, and here's the thing, you do have to, people, I'm going to offend people, I know it, but you can't live in the...
That's what we do here, you know, on the Tarot Today show. We offend people. We do, because you can't make everybody happy.
I mean, there's this sort of like romantic comfort blanket, if you will, of Taro's historic past and the archetypes, etc., etc. Yes, okay, but, you know, come on. For it to truly serve a function, it has to adapt. It has to evolve. It has to reflect social norms, and now even more cultural norms. Tarot is a worldwide phenomena, and so you have to attempt to reach a balance once again of not detaching completely and ignoring that rich heritage, but don't be imprisoned by it either. And so, for example, when now you can go nuts and try and be so contemporary and cool and slick, and that would backfire. You know, if I was to depict the cards in today's settings, that's going to be an absolute mistake. So I always depict my characters in some safe historical setting, you know, be it sort of a quasi steampunky Renaissance twist, or more recently, we say with my Lenormands, in some Victorian or Downton Abbey kind of style. That's different and safe. It allows me to inject certain sort of social criteria, but it's fashionably safe By that, let me give you an example. In one of my cards, I'm trying to depict this sort of instant of impatience, of anxiety, and I depict a woman in the distance, at the back of a room, looking to the foreground, where I've depicted a telephone, with the message implicitly suggesting that she's waiting for that damn phone to ring, okay? And I drop a little clue that it's, 3 minutes to midnight or something. In other words, there's a deadline involved, and time's run out, and the anxiety of waiting that phone to ring. Okay. Now, the phone is something, it's a sort of a very decorative version of a phone on a receiver, an old-fashioned phone, with a cable and all the rest of it. Something that 90% of people looking at that card won't have used, in this day of mobile phones. So one could argue, why didn't I put an iPhone in there or something? I'm being pedantic here. But the reason being that if you were to try to be too clever and too contemporary, that would backfire. Because then, how do you depict someone, what model iPhone are they using? What is the model of their hair? Is it a sort of a 50s, 60s mullet on a male, or a beehive on a woman, or flared jeans of the 60s? All those things, ironically, will date it far more than my Renaissance image ever would, And so it's a clever play on symbolism and reference and context, because sometimes one could be too clever. And I repeat, if I had done a tarot deck in the 60s and shown some hippie dude or writer in the 90s or something holding a really cool, modern, contemporary mobile phone that was actually the size of a loaf of bread with an antenna coming out of it, it would look comical.
Yeah.
So what I use more generic symbolisms that are archetypes, but not an archetype that was produced in the 14th century. I bring it up to date and is relevant. That's the intriguing balance. And that's where I think my prior experience comes into play. Because as a graphic designer, I never describe myself as an artist. I find that pedantic, sort of like, it's just too grand a title. I describe myself as an illustrator. I tell stories, not lies. I tell stories visually. And I used to tell stories for my clients in a visually efficient manner. Going back to the idea of color and symbolism, that is, in this multicultural, international world of tarot, one has to be careful with that. Colors are not universal. Their symbols and their meanings are not universal. So it's absurd to get too tied up into this sort of academic pretense of having to be accurate to some ideological, historical reference from tarot. I think it's misdirection and it's too disciplined. Backfires.
Yeah, I think it can cause you to miss the point, is what I think. And I think that a lot of what you're saying is something that from the other side of things, as tarot readers and all of that stuff. What are people doing? Like, one of the first things that they do, they learn keywords. They learn a keyword for every card, and then they put their hands on the tarot deck, and it's like, okay, well, how are you gonna, look for your keyword there? It's totally backwards in a sense that here you are describing everything you're taking into consideration and that you're giving them to work at, and it's like they would do much better to open their eyes and look at it and, find their way to understanding that way instead of just trying to memorize a list of somebody's keywords, which disagree with somebody else's keywords. It's kind of a funny thing.
I'll give you another example, if I may. In the Mystic Palette deck, the most recent one, I've depicted the 10 of Wands in a significantly different way. In most decks, including my own previous ones, it's some variation of some guy struggling along the road or whatever with 10 presumably heavy wands on his back as some kind of symbolic reference of this burden he has to carry. You know? And presumably in the 14th century, that sort of like imagery would have been far more relevant. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people at some point in their lives of that era would indeed have carried a weight on their back, and hence it served a perfect sort of visual analogy for that. Fast forward to our times, and how many people have ever carried a physical weight on their back?
Right.
Unless, like me, you're a cheapskate and you carry the local box from IKEA or something. That's about as close as it's going to get. So when I did the Mystic 10 of Wands, okay, I did a visual hats off to the traditional thing. I do show someone with some wands on their back. Okay, there's your connection for you, you know. But I only did 5. And then I had the other 5 being merely a reflection in a mirror. And my message with that was that today, burdens are probably not physical. They are probably, for the most of us, emotional. We are concerned about our finances, our health, our relationships, our careers. Whatever it is that is our burden is an emotional one. And as such, the weight of those burdens is very ethereal, you know. It can't be put on a scale and quantified. Its weight is dependent on our interpretation of them, how it affects us. And very often, one might argue that those weights, those concerns, are not even actual. They are imagined or they are exaggerated in our heads, and hence the reflection in the mirror, because they are not touchy-feely, they are in our head. But that doesn't mean they're not equally burdensome, whether it's genuinely worry about or it's merely exaggerated to the point of concern in our heads. It adds up to the same thing. We're worried about them, you know, and they become a burden. So that psychological nuance that I play with, that in this case the companion book does have to provide more of an explanation with, but once it's been explained, I hope that most people will say, yeah, I can see that, I can relate to that, that's how I felt about this or this circumstance in my life, you know? And it becomes then the Tarot becomes a living entity, and I think more powerful because of that.
Yeah, it makes so much sense, and absolutely agree with that. The 10 of Wands is a good example of it, because a lot of times that card, as a reader, comes up in a reading, and you think, okay, you got a lot on your plate, is kind of how I put it often, because they don't have a bunch of wands on their back, but all those things going on in their life, all the things they've taken on, are what causes the burdens. And, we is oftentimes choose to create the burden. So what you're talking about with the psychological, the feeling, a lot of times it's just stress. And I do think that's much more relatable. And, talking about, the idea of historical decks and respecting them, you've done now a Marseille, you've done several tarot decks in the Rider-Waite-Smith tradition, you've done your own oracle, and also a Lenormand, but you haven't done a soft deck. You haven't taken on Lady Frida's work and her whole rabid fan base. And there's other, the Visconti Forza, the Solabusca, maybe even the Minchiot, all these other traditions that are out there.
Yeah.
Have those, has there been anything that's like interested you about those yet in the way, you got interested in the Marseille for this new deck, the Decoratif that's out?
In the case of the Marseilles and the Rider-Waite Smith, no offense to Pamela Coleman, but those two are, in my opinion, more like genres. They are categories of tarot, and so they offered more of an open field to apply one's own style and take on. Whereas the others you mentioned, first of all, I'm not a particularly great admirer of anything I've read about Crowley's life, but beyond that, the artwork of Paris is so specific to her. It's not a genre. It is it. And I have no real interest in merely trying to tweak someone else's specific artwork. Not only would it be arrogant for me to assume I could even do that, but I personally, I don't see the point of it. She did it in her way, and a strong artistic and symbolic way. I would personally see no purpose in me trying to do that again. I only do things that I personally believe I can add something more to, aesthetically and in functionality, and I don't think I could do that to specifically designed individual decks, if that makes sense.
No, it does make sense, and it is kind of a thing where even people that have tried. I have a few examples of people that tried to do like maybe a Thoth hybrid, with another style, and even just their version of the Thoth, and I don't know. I feel like it's a weird feel. It's the best way I can describe it, and I don't know that her work was kind of abstract. I think that's kind of different. I think that's more of it's almost like her intuitive factors involved in making it. So, I was just wondering, because I've seen people try to take it on, and I don't know. It didn't attract me as just a person who buys tarot decks to read with them. But the other thing too about this is, and I referenced your website. Our listeners, again, the link is on the page. Definitely go to it. But when I go to your website and I watch the videos you create for your decks, look really cinematic to me. They're really. I'm like, wow, this is like good production value is the way that I would say it back in the day. But like these are classy, and you watch them, and even just looking at all the things on your website, it's like stepping into a very real but magical world. For each video I watch, I feel like I'm entering a new world, the world of that deck. And I was just wondering, is there any kind of, what you could say is like kind of an alchemical maybe, or maybe a magical process to creating things that look so magical to the rest of us?
No, I'm not going to claim any sort of mystical, magical input there. The purpose of those videos, apart from I enjoy doing them, is fundamentally they're supposed to provide potential customers with a preview of what an upcoming deck looks like. It gives a quick, entertaining review of the images so they can decide, yeah, that looks cool, I'll buy that, when it comes out kind of thing. So it's a promotion, a movie trailer in a sense. But also, I also do like these animated cards occasionally. And once again, it's fun, but it serves a purpose as well, because if you think about it, at best, any card is like a freeze frame, right? It's a static image that projects a story, or rather it projects an instant within a story, a freeze frame, if you will. And sometimes I like to sort of add like the imaginary 30 seconds that preceded or followed that freeze frame. So, for example, my 10 of Wands analogy, if it, rather than just depicting the guy with 10 wands on his back, frozen in time and space, as it were, if I did the animated equivalent to that, I might show him sort of gradually lifting up from bended knee to emphasize the theoretical weight of his burden, and to show his stumbling forward with the weight on his back, that kind of thing. So the animated imagery kind of creates more of a scene, more of a story that surrounds that captured image that's represented in the card alone. And sometimes that's not just entertainment. Sometimes I think that sort of enriched the mood and the feel of the card that people can watch, and then they hopefully will remember that scene when they pull the card. Yeah.
Oh wow. Yeah, I like that, because it does. A lot of times it is about. I've always thought of, film, video, whatever we want to call it, animation, as being, kind of the type of medium that has the biggest impact. You've got the sound, you've got the visual, you can take people into the story. And so a lot of that, I think, is it's an extra bonus to have that kind of, see those kind of things. And then when you work for, you're doing a reading or something and you saw, it's like a memory, it's like muscle memory, kind of recalls that story in a sense. So I love that, and I want to thank you again. I feel like I've talked your ear off today, and I'm so glad that you took the time to come on the Tarot Today radio show. Ciro Marchetti, it's been such a pleasure talking to you, and thanks so much. And I look forward to everything you're doing. I just love looking at everything on your website, and definitely everybody get to the links at the bottom of the page. Go to Ciro's website, and we'll have all the links up there for them to see all this great stuff we're talking about today. So thanks again.
Okay, well, thank you for having me. I hope I've responded in a reasonably coherent, rambling manner to your various questions. And
yeah, I hope I asked them in some sort of coherent manner. It's like, here's my word salad. Do you want to answer that? That's how I look at it sometimes. But no, this was wonderful, 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 wonderful. And just enjoy your day. And again, this was a pleasure. Bye bye.
Okay, thanks to you. Bye bye.
And that was it. The interview with Ciro Marchetti.
Yes. I was like flabbergasted. It was so much fun, and I loved just so much of what he had to say. I'm going to listen back to it again, because it isn't just a person who makes a bunch of decks. I feel like he's thoughtful about it. He's also and I don't know that every deck creator does this, but I think he takes into consideration, what can the reader use? What's the reader going to see? So I love that. I think he's gone to so many gone to so many, reading events and stuff. I think he met so many readers. He's probably got a real sense of what people are looking for, because people will tell you what they want.
Yeah, my big takeaway was how humble he was, too.
Yeah. I think it's easy to kind of see somebody who's successful, and if you're tarot people and you see his decks everywhere, you think, oh, wow, he's really successful. And so we take that and we throw all our baggage onto it, and we think, oh, if I was successful, I wouldn't have to do this, or I wouldn't even talk to these people. We get this idea that really successful people aren't humble, and I can tell you I've interviewed so many of them that, for the most part, they are, So but that's cool for others to see that. But hey, wow, though, I should tell everybody what's coming up on the Psychic Talk Radio Network, shouldn't I?
Oh, we have so many great interviews coming up. I wanted to mention real quick that I did an update today, has all of the interviews and shows that are coming up, and a lot of other great stuff. You'll find it on the website, thetarotguild.com. Just go over there and check out the website under the news section, because you'll see all the things we have going on. We've got so much going on at the Guild now. It's so exciting. What's coming up on the network?
Well, we've got a great week coming up here. Our next show is Sunday, October 24th at 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern, and it's the Magic Universe Show with host Sharona Rapsick. She's going to be talking magic with her special guest, Tarot Master Tamara Kerr. Also, they're going to be doing free tarot mini readings, and they'll have open lines as well. And then after that, Monday, October 25th, 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern, it's the Wisdom of the Soul Show with your host, Janice Fuchs. And Friday, it's Spiritual Guidance Radio with angelic channel and healer Catherine Hahn, and she'll be giving free on-air guidance. And then Dax and I will be back on Saturday, October 30th, next Saturday, 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern. It's our Happy Halloween episode, and we're going to have a Psychic Spin segment and be doing free tarot readings. And so if there's anything you want us, cards, what do you want to know from the universe, let Dax and I know. Get a hold of us on the Tarot Guild. And back to you, Dax.
Yep, we're going to be finishing up October. The Psychic Spin, we're going to ask the tarot, what are shadow people? I think last year on Halloween we did our ghost reel, and this year we're doing what are shadow people, and we'll see what comes up in the tarot. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Yes, spooktacular.
Spooktacular. Hey, and don't forget to stop by the Tarot Guild. I started a comprehensive list of Halloween tarot decks. Actually, it's tarot decks, oracle decks, Lenormand decks, and it was huge. I decided to go all out and do the most comprehensive list that is available on the web for Halloween for decks, and over 100 decks. And then this year, I just updated it. I added even more decks. In fact, there was so many that I had to split the article into part 1 and part 2. So I decided to put the Oracle decks and the Lenormand decks that were Halloween themed on part 2, and part 1 has all of the Halloween tarot decks. And you can check that out on the website, thetarotguild.com. Click on articles and scroll down. You'll find it. And it's got everything on there. There's some great decks that are coming out. Some of them aren't even out yet, but I included them because you can go on to Amazon and pre-order right now. So if you're getting ready for Halloween and you don't have enough Halloween decks, check out our list. And we're just going to keep doing that. We're going to keep growing it each year. And on next Saturday's show, we could talk about some of the decks. We can mention some of the ones coming out over the next month or two, going into 2022, Mary. And we also have a link to an article I did with some tarot spreads for Halloween. And by the way, if you look through that list and I've missed your favorite Halloween-themed deck, whether it's tarot, Lenormand, or an oracle deck, just let me know. I'll add it to the list. Also, if you have any Halloween spreads that are favorites of yours, I've only got a couple on there, and there's room for a lot more spreads. So if you have any ideas, anything you've used in the past or come up with on your own, just get a hold of me, and I'll make up a nice banner image for it and everything, and we'll get it on to the spreads article, and we'll get your favorite decks into the list if they're not already there. But you know what? They're probably already there. Mary, it's so comprehensive.
It is. It is. It just goes on, and I look through it, and I'm like, do I need some more Halloween decks? I do. Always I do.
Always. Yep. And like we said, you can always see the upcoming shows on psychictalk.net. We also have an event section on thetarotguild.com that has all the events coming up, which also has most of our Psychic Talk shows, at least the ones that are related to tarot, or the host is a tarot master or reader. And what else? I was going to invite everybody to come over and join the website because it's free, folks. That's right. Just go over to thetarotguild.com, the top of any page. You'll see the sign up, sign in. Just click sign up. You can put in your email address and a password, or there's like a bunch of social media links. You can sign up with your Google account, your Twitter account, your Facebook account, Yahoo, LinkedIn. Yeah, a lot of them are there, and you can take advantage of the website. It's not just a website, folks. It's the world's only tarot social media networking platform. It's a full-featured social media website, just like joining Facebook, Instagram, what have you, only it's all tarot all the time. And just like those other big social media websites, it's free to join, but, none of the negative stuff that you find on some of these other platforms. And we also have a premium membership. We do a lot of workshops and Q&As throughout the year, interviews, and you get your membership certificate. You get access to get certified if you want to do that. You get 33% off my Tarot and Numerology course if you want to enroll in that. And we just changed the premium membership to $1 a month. I kid you not. $12 billed annually, but it comes out to $1 a month, folks. Better than Netflix, Mary.
Absolutely. Cheaper than like a year's worth of Tarot Guild membership is a lot less than I spend on tarot decks, people. Let me just say that. It's less than the price of one tarot deck.
I was going to say, I spend more on, 2 lattes.
It's true. It's so true.
Yeah, so come over and join us. The forum is really starting to take off. There's a lot of great posts in there and questions and conversations going on. Things are really starting to snowball. So come over and join us on thetarotguild.com. We'd love to have you over there. And I can't wait till next week, Mary.
Me either. It's going to be
Halloween.
Spectacular.
Yeah, and I should mention, it's Doug's birthday on Halloween. He's a Halloween baby. And also, it's the birthday of the Tarot Guild. It's our 17th anniversary. Yes, we're going to be going into our 18th year.
Wow. It's also the 30th. That's the show on Saturday the 30th. Yeah. That's my son, Connor's birthday, who's also a member of the Tarot Guild. He's on there. You'll find him on there.
Yeah.
Tell him happy birthday.
Awesome. Well, thanks for everybody, thanks for listening in, everybody, and We're glad you were able to join us for this exciting show, and there's more coming. There's more coming. We got Pamela Steele, we got Sasha Graham, we got Paulina Fay. I mean, there are so many fantastic interviews coming up. It's amazing. So enjoy the rest of your weekend, everyone. Don't forget to tune in tomorrow for Magic Universe. I know we didn't do readings today because it was a listener party, but you can call in tomorrow. Same phone number, 714-816-4628, 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. London time in the UK. And hang out with Tamara Kerr and Sharona tomorrow. Tamara is fabulous. You're just going to have a lot of fun. Bye, everybody. Goodbye, Mary. This was fun.
Bye, Jack. Yes.
Bye,
everybody. Thanks for listening.
Good night, John Boy.
Good night, Mary Ellen.